Today we're discussing Leia, Princess of Alderaan by Claudia Gray. And stay on target because after the panel, the author herself will join us to answer some of your questions. The Star Wars Show Book Club is a series where we gather friends and fans to read Star Wars books, examining how they relate to all of the Star Wars films, live-action shows, animated series, comics, and games. Through these stories, we enrich our understanding of the galaxy far, far away. Hello, Kristin Baver here, ready to unpack one of my favorite stories about one of my favorite characters with a few new friends. Our story begins when Princess Leia is just 16 years old, so about 3 years before we meet the fearless rebel fighter in Star Wars A New Hope. Although Bail and Breha Organa have been devoted parents, young Leia is starting to feel some tension in the family. When she discovers that Bail, his friend from the Galactic Senate Mon Mothma, and some other key figures are helping to form an alliance of rebels to fight against Emperor Palpatine's tyrannical rule, Leia wants in. Their fight is just beginning. The daring heist for the Death Star plans in Rogue One, a Star Wars story, still a couple years in the future. But Leia's formative years hold many connections to her future as leader and general, including introducing a young and eccentric Emmeline Haldo, tangling with the foul Grand Moff Tarkin, making a visit to the planet Crate, and her connection to the Force. Now set a course for Alderaan, and let's meet our book club crew. So first up, we have Kai Charles, an independent book reviewer and dedicated member of the Star Wars fan group Fangirls Going Rogue.
Hi!
Next, there's Nina Penalosa, a fashion blogger who finds clever ways to incorporate her fandom into her everyday looks. Fun fact, Nina is a self-proclaimed Porg enthusiast. And we're also joined by our very special guest, Kat Tabor. Best known as the voice of Padmé Amidala in Star Wars The Clone Wars, Kat has also voiced Leia Organa in select Star Wars video games and as a guest on the show Robot Chicken.
Hi.
To start us off at the beginning of the story, Leia is embarking on her Day of Demand, where she'll have to complete 3 types of challenges to prove that she's worthy of ruling Alderaan. Which of the 3 challenges do you think was the most essential in creating the Leia that we know from the films?
I'll have to say Challenge of the Heart was the one that I felt most of who Leia was. Just the way that she approached it so diplomatically, and also that Anakin streak in her where she found a way to do something that she wasn't supposed to do. And that, to me, is perfect Leia.
I can't imagine separating the 3. What I loved so much was that, again, I think all 3 components bring together the Leia that we know. And that was what was so cool about the character originally in the films, because she wasn't just one of those things. She was fully fleshed out. And that's why I think she was so influential as a female character.
I think the Challenge of the Heart was what made her most essentially Leia, especially how, the first one is that she goes on is a relief trip to Wobani, and how she, like Kai said, like she had that little Anakin streak, trying to find ways to like make it right. But in the end, it's like she realizes she made this huge mistake, like she ruined plans that were already set in motion. I feel like she learned a lot from that mission.
How does reading about this period of Leia's life make you see the character differently in A New Hope and, even beyond that?
This book fleshed out more of what we wanted to know. Like, we wanted to know, did Leia know she was adopted? And how did that affect her? And it just, to me, created the foundations of family. Skywalkers don't have a really good record with family. But for Leia, it's like, I saw all 4 of her parents in this book. The love and respect her parents have for her gave her the strength to be her true self. And there's shades of Padme in her when she's talking about how she loves wildness in the storm. I'm like, that's Anakin, it's in her blood.
There was so many things that happened in this book that made you just go, oh, this is gonna happen. And it was painful to watch, the first time, but to have all of this backstory and to know how she already feels like she has messed things up, but then to have it be at this level, her own planet, her own family, it informs that scene even more. I mean, it makes it so much more heartbreaking. And Tarkin is a jerk.
Yes. That should be the subtitle of this book. Leia, Princess of Alderaan, Tarkin is a jerk.
Yeah, when I watched Rogue One and A New Hope again, and having all this backstory from this book, it made the fate of Alderaan even more devastating, because she's trying her best to save her people, save her planet. And when you see Bail in Rogue One, And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to go to Alderaan. I got to let my people know that this is not going to end well. I'm like, oh, you have no idea, Bail. You have no idea.
Because this book was part of the journey to Star Wars The Last Jedi series, when I was reading that and had that in mind, Leia on Wobani really reminded me of Poe in The Last Jedi, because she thinks she knows better, but she's really not seeing the bigger picture, and she ends up really hurting the cause. But it was really just the first in a long series of failures for her in this story. Why do you think that was such an important part of the journey for her character? And did it also make you think of any other moments that we see in the films?
It's interesting because her failures are more from a lack of communication. She decides on the refugees not from a good place of heart, but also because she's like, this will show them. So I wonder, not that Leia's above mistakes, but these mistakes seem very in line with the teenage growth of figuring things out, except she has a lot more power and responsibility. So her failures are more epic in scope than an average teenager's.
Like, I immediately noticed when Kira's telling her, you can't be afraid to fail because you're going to learn from those failures. So I immediately thought, okay, this book is going to set up all the things that Leia does. So what more is she going to learn, and how is it going to shape her to become the Leia that we know in the films?
I think something else interesting about it is that it's just a reminder, and it's a theme that happens throughout Star Wars a lot. Actually, I was just rewatching a Clone Wars episode where Ahsoka is introduced to Padmé's friend, who is a separatist, and she's making assumptions like that, she's going to have tentacles and be this horrible person. And one of the things that you continually learn is things sometimes aren't exactly what you think they are, and that if you can step back for a moment and get information, it's always a better route to go.
So I do want to talk a little bit about some of that connective tissue in terms of the characters, because it took me a while to get to love Holdo in this book, even though I really love the character from the films. So I was kind of surprised that her name showed up, and I thought, oh great, yes, I love Holdo. And then I was like, oh man, she's a lot. She's a lot in this book. She's really eccentric. She's got bells on her sleeves. Her hair is just every rainbow, every shade from the rainbow, and it took me a little while to kind of warm up to her, but I thought, obviously that's intentional, and my journey as the reader then kind of was at the same pace as Leia's journey of going from, who is this, to, oh, now we're friends, okay. So what did you think of Holdo, young Holdo?
I immediately liked her. Like, when you first see her, she's like saying something like, I hope it's dangerous. I want to get more comfortable with nearness and inevitability of death. And thinking about how she goes out in The Last Jedi, it's like, oh, she's prepared.
I loved her too. I felt like it's interesting because her and Leia are both rebelling about different things. Her culture, it's very much about being mellow, but also uniform. They talk about they wear certain color cloaks, and she's the opposite of that. She's doing the wild hair. And that line that she says in The Last Jedi where Holdo says, you taught me how, I see that in this adventure that she learned from Leia, and Leia learned from her.
And I also loved that there were a number of times in the story where both Leia and Holdo did like a very Padme move of recognizing that they're 16-year-old girls and no one takes them seriously, so they can get away with anything as long as they're able to demur when they need to.
Yeah, using their smallness actually, instead of having it be a hindrance, to use it as a weapon. But I loved the character of Holdo in this. She's just so instantly likable. She's underestimated because they think she's kind of dumb because of the way that she talks, only to later realize, no, if you listen to what she's saying, she's actually saying something really important that is taking the rest of you a long time to notice.
But we haven't really talked about Kier at all. We mentioned him briefly, and I feel like we have got to talk about this new character. Nina, you look like you're having some thoughts about Kier.
I just clearly they're setting up something for a romance, and I'm worried for this girl because he's also from Alderaan, and we know what happens to Alderaan. So as I'm reading and seeing their relationship develop, I'm like, oh my god, like what is going to happen to this guy? Is he going to be on Alderaan when it happens?
I think he was good for her because he also reflected Leia's choice, because it was interesting to see that he didn't agree with her and what her parents were doing. But the fact that he kept asking Leia, what do you want for yourself? What kind of life do you want for yourself? And at first she didn't want to hear it, but she chose clearly that this was going to be her life. And it's sad, but it's also beautiful. And it also is a good way, because as a Han and Leia person, I wasn't feeling Kier. I was like, wait, okay, who is this? No.
We're like, who's this guy?
Who's this guy?
I'm the same. When I know about a character and their love with, so like the Han and Leia thing, I was really reluctant at first. I was like, she did not love anyone else. I don't care how old she was. Then I started to like him and think, oh, I like him. And then I was like, what's going to happen to him?
But early on, I started to suspect that he was going to be a problem. And that worried me for the rest of the book, because I wasn't sure what kind of problem he was going to be. He did essentially end up being a problem, but a problem of a different stripe, because he couldn't see past his dedication to their world, to the larger galaxy. He couldn't see the bigger picture in the end. He could only see protecting his people and his planet. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a real pleasure to talk to you all today. Thanks for joining us, Claudia. Super excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Your book made me feel so much worse about Alderaan and what we see in A New Hope. in a good way, I think. But, I had never thought that much about the people of Alderaan and, beyond the Organas. Thought a lot about them, but when you really start to get to know some of the citizens and some of the architecture and some of the beautiful terrain, it's just a whole lot worse when you're watching what happens.
And all those refugees get a place to live for a few years.
Yeah. So, good job ripping my heart out. Thanks for that.
My work here is done.
One of the best new canon novels. Where did the idea for Brea to have pulmonodes come from? Was there a deeper meaning behind them, especially her choice to not encase them in synthetic skin?
We've seen mechanical replacements for body parts, or in Vader's case, almost all parts. We'd seen that, but it was almost always portrayed as representing at least a risk of losing part of your humanity. Okay, some people just need medical tech to get along, and it doesn't make you different or bad or less human in any way. And so I thought it would be nice to do something like that with Brea.
This one comes from Shelley May. Which Star Wars character do you think you're most like?
Well, then I guess I would have to say the child from The Mandalorian, because based on my quarantine experience, my strengths in life are napping and snacking. That and like pulling the dome around me so I don't have to worry anymore. Can I just say that little floating pram is like my favorite Star Wars prop ever?
Oh my God, I love it.
The idea of the Mandalorian, like he had to get with this thing to be like pair device.
This one comes from Sarah. That end line is an absolute killer. How'd you come up with that beautiful and heartbreaking sentence?
It honestly, the last line of the book was one of the first things that occurred to me. Because that was the question. They came to me, my entire prompt on this was, they said, we want you to write the story of how Leia got involved in the rebellion. I was like, great, how did it happen? And they said, you tell us. And I was like, I was very aware, pretty much every original character I make up for this is dead as of A New Hope. And I know that, and I knew all the readers were going to know that, and there was going to be no way to entirely forget it. And so I wanted to touch base on that point.
One of the elements that I really loved about your story was that you gave Leia a lot of agency, but you also gave her a lot of moments to make her own choices along the way. But here she was 16 years old and really making that decision to say, no, this is important to me, and I see what I might have to sacrifice, and I know that my life might be in danger, and I know that my family's lives might be in danger, and now I see that my whole planet might be in danger, but it's worth it for the greater good.
When I started, a lot of people were going, oh, you're going to explain how Bail brought her in. And that I didn't want to do for two reasons. One, like you said, Leia's not a character who passively sits back and waits for things. But also my very strong sense of Bail Organa and Brea Organa this is a huge and dangerous undertaking. And not only would they want to protect their daughter from it, but it would be really terrible to drag anybody into that without their full knowledge, and particularly somebody who's still a child. So it had to be something that was led by Leia and something that she had to make up her own mind about.
Thank you so much for joining us, Claudia.
Oh, thank you.
And thanks to all of you who joined us from home, sent in your questions, and watched along. Come back next time when the Star Wars Show Book Club returns to join the fight with Spark of the Resistance by Justina Ireland. And don't forget to tweet your questions using hashtag SWSBCSpark, and we'll ask some on the show. Until then, may the Force be with you.